Okay, so if you are a Black mom who is living this co-parenting life, right, where your father of your children does not live in the house that you are in, or even if he don't live in the same state, okay, like this is the video for you because we're going to be talking about how you can still confidently take kid-free vacations. If you're somebody who has a level of frustration with the support that you're getting from dad, or just the way that dad parents, right? And you feel like you shouldn't leave your kids alone, or you can't just leave them with him, or whatever thoughts you may have about that. I have brought my friend of 30 plus years onto here. Okay, onto here. She is going to be spilling the tea on how she makes not one, not two, but multiple kid-free vacations happen every single year. Okay, so I am a travel coach and I help Black moms confidently take the kid-free vacations that they want to take. And the goal of this kid-free vacation series is to make sure that you as a mom have uninterrupted free time, right? Uninterrupted free time where momming is not the center of your day, it's not the center of your week, it's not the center of your time, and you can just be a woman no matter what type of momming situation you have set up, right? So that's what we're going to be talking about. So welcome, Zenitra.
Thank you. Thank you.
So for those in the audience who don't know who you are, right, or not familiar with who you are, can you share your story, like your journey, and just share a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so yes, I'm Zenitra Perry. I am an entrepreneur. I have two companies. I have a consulting company where I focus on executive coaching, specifically helping women to find themselves again after they've lost themselves, whether it's be to depression, divorce, downsizing, what have you. I help them get back to the center of who they are and live a more fulfilling life. I also am a strategy consultant and speaker from both of those perspectives. So that's one business. And then I also own a trucking company where, we move freight up and down, primarily the East Coast. But even going back before that, because that's kind of a new part of my life, I am originally from North Carolina, went to school, Howard University, and then moved to New York City. My degree is in accounting, so I started out as an auditor with PricewaterhouseCoopers, kind of handling every worst case scenario you could possibly imagine as an accountant. And then once I left there, I went to HBO initially in their accounting department, but ultimately spent 15 years in sales and marketing. At the end of my career there, I had developed and led the sales strategy and education team. So my team was responsible for creating training curriculums to teach our partners how to sell our product, whether it's HBO, HBO Go, HBO Max, and the many iterations that the organization went through. So that lived within the affiliate marketing world. So, I've pulled together different marketing campaigns, but I also have that kind of facilitator curriculum design experience as well. So I take all of those things and I bring them with me into my new world as an entrepreneur. And so I get to do all of those things in many different ways, whether it's, in the trucking business, I'm still an accountant and I got to make sure that, all the bills get paid and invoices are sent out. On my coaching side, I'm still building curriculums and teaching people about effective communication and leadership skills. So it's interesting how all of those things kind of come together in this new space that I'm in.
So so take us from where you started on your mom journey, right, to where you are today. And within that, like how taking getaways, right, previously, right, when you were married is different than it is now as a single mom of three.
All right. So I didn't mention that I'm a mom, but I wouldn't be here if I wasn't, right? So I do have two children, and travel has always been a part of my life. When I was a young girl, traveling to church conferences and dance competitions and dancing on cruise lines. And that kind of evolved into my young adult life and going to different countries with my friends. And I'm just having these kind of worldly experiences. So I've always been a traveler. And so I knew that no matter what, travel was always going to be a part of my life. So when I was married, I remember the first big trip that I took once I had my son, my first child. We went to Brazil. And so at this time, my son was one. He was 1 year old. And we were going to be gone to Brazil for like 10 days. So this is the first trip outside of the country, and I have a
Mhm.
1 year old. Um, for a little just point of reference, I was also that mom who, whenever my mom came to visit after I had just, first had my son, she wanted to watch him for us in the living room of our two-bedroom apartment, and I was uncomfortable with that. I was like, "Where you taking my baby, ma'am? Like,
Right.
I know you
You can't
raised
keep me
me."
in this room.
I'm like, I mean, you raised me, but you don't know this child. This is my child. And I don't know that you can do the things to keep my child safe when you're just a couple 100 feet away from me. So that's where I started out. And so now 1 year
Right.
later, I'm about to go to a whole nother country. Myself and my husband at the time, we were going together. So early, I guess I can say that early on, I began taking trips. It wasn't a solo trip, but it was a trip without the kid,
Mhm.
without the kids. And so we had, we were nervous, but we also valued the experience of going to other places. So we had to figure out how to make that work. So we leaned into our village. I flew my son down to North Carolina. I was living in New York at the time, and for the time that we were in Brazil, he was in North Carolina. And I can say that from that point on, my friends would joke and say that I dropped my kids off at my parents' house like they lived down the street, but it was always a plane ride away because I was going to be going on these experiences. I was going to be, visiting these different countries, and my mother loves her grandkids. So I definitely leaned into that. I would say it isn't always easy for the children because they love their parents and they love their home. We're very
Mhm.
blessed to have created an environment that they want to stay in and return to. And so there would be many tears, and particularly with my son, like he got to the point where he was like, maybe 2 years old, maybe 3 years old. He would fall asleep with his shoes on because every day he would be telling my mother that his parents were coming to get him.
Ooh,
So
any moment they're gonna be here to get me.
listen, baby,
Okay.
your mama's in another country. She's not coming until she's actually coming. So even though for me, I had already made the decision, or my husband at the time, we had already made the decision that we were going to be traveling, and the kid was going to be somewhere. I don't want to make it seem like that was easy and like once you kind of set it and forget it. Every
Right.
day, there's this like feeling in your stomach of like, man, I hope my kid's okay, knowing that they're safe and well. But it got to the point where, my mom would be like, don't call. Because whenever you call, he's reminded of you. And,
Right.
and that just makes things worse here. Like we get him to a good place. And so if we were going to be gone for 10 days, like we could talk to him on day one, maybe day eight.
Hey, yep.
and then, and then day 10 when it was time to come home.
Yep.
Because, kids love their parents and they want to be with them and they want to be in their own home. So that's how I started the journey of traveling kid free. And I had a partner at that point. And for me, I can say that because that was the system that was set up, now that I'm, no longer married, I still lean into that same system, with
Mhm.
that same resistance from my kids to this day. But they are even more vocal because they just want to stay at home because they're older now, and in their minds, they think that they're old enough to stay at home by themselves, which they're not. But I still, lean into my mom. And at this point, I live closer to them, so I don't have to fly to drop them off. But it's more complicated because now it's not one kid, it's two kids, and now it's older kids who have activities and different events that they need to go to. So there was a time where while I was away, there was going to be a school dance, also a basketball game, and cheer practice. So I had to lean into not only just my mother, had to lean into my dad, I had to lean into my aunt, all of these people to keep the ball rolling on what life looks like for my kids while I'm away, and being able to go on these kid free vacations.
Mhm. Mhm. It's looking very different a little bit now. Like, like just when I think about it's funny because when you first started this journey of like the kid free vacation, I was not even a mother. Okay.
Right.
Like I was in these streets single, sexy, and free. Like, and I was just so it was so great to be able to still have you involved in the trips that I was taking and I was hosting, right? Even though your life looked very different than mine,
Right.
right? And I think that sometimes like moms who become moms and become parents and have friends who are single, right, and are inviting them to go stuff, they will use the excuse of like, that's just not my life anymore, right? Like I can't participate because, I'm a mom now, I'm a wife now, I'm an ex now, right? Like these are the things that I can no longer do. And I think that, very early on, you made a decision that, I am going to be all of these things. I'm going to be a mom, I'm going to be a wife, and I'm going to be Zenitra, right? As well. So what I'm wondering is like, when you were married, what was that conversation like with your husband, right? To the point of like, I am like, we're going to travel together. And then I also may just go places by myself.
Okay, I wasn't at the I go places by myself point yet.
Oh, okay.
Because he was with me on that same, the trips that you were planning when we were together, he was there too. And so I think that thinking through kind of a few different directions. Number one, I'm blessed and fortunate to have you as a friend for a very long time. So anything that's dealing with my friend, I'm going to be there. We've also always celebrated birthdays. Like I remember the first birthday gift I got you back in 1993. Now I know you don't because your memory.
I know. Zanisha remember
No,
everything about our entire life. I remember barely anything. So
but
she's like my historical reference guide on what had happened in our friendship and our life.
yes, my aunt was working at J.C. Penney, and I remember going to get you an outfit. It was these little pink little shorts, Arizona shorts, and a t-shirt with a print. But
Oh, Arizona, girl. If you're a woman of a certain age, you know about Arizona.
come on. So we've always celebrated birthdays. And when we got into our adulthood, because we haven't lived in the same city since we graduated high school, right? So
Mm-hmm.
traveling to see one another as friends was also already a part of our friendship.
Mm-hmm.
It was a part of our lifestyle. So it wasn't just going on trips for leisure, but I came down for your 25th birthday. And I remember even like when we were in college coming to each other's homecoming or whenever you cross, right? So we've always had travel as a part of our lifestyle. So I didn't even have that it wasn't a conversation that had to be had because I was already living that life whenever he and I met and got married, and he was in alignment with that, right? Like he would go and visit his family or his friends that lived outside. So I guess from that perspective, we did do solo trips when we were just doing things to support our friends. But as we got married, I think you have to get clear on who's in your front row and then set the boundaries of, well, I'm going to show up for those. I can't show up for everyone. It's so funny when I was in New York, people always used to ask me like, oh, what's going on? Because I used to be out on these streets. And I would laugh and say, I don't know what's going on. I just go where I'm invited. So prior to having kids, if you invite me to something, I'm going. If it's a birthday party, if it's a girls' night, if it's a celebration for a promotion, I'm showing up. And it was for everybody, right? Anybody that was in my circle. However, once I became married and had kids, I wasn't able to go to as many of those things. But my front row, I was going to show up for them every single time.
Yo, I
And I think,
forgot we used to call it the front row.
yeah,
Oh,
yep.
I love it. Yes, I forgot about that. Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
so at that point, I think we're also lucky in that we were, even though you weren't married or had kids, you were in a relationship. So when you had your 30th birthday party, your boyfriend was there. So I was going to bring my husband, right?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have too many girls only spaces by the time I got married and had kids. I needed to leave him as much. And even whenever I had things, right? Like my husband's going to be there. So whenever you would come, that also helped in you kind of building a relationship with him, you staying at our house, right? So it's never a one-off thing. Taking the trip with the friend can't be the only time that you have that relationship. You know, that it has to exist outside of this larger trip. It really has to be a part of your lifestyle. And you do that by showing up for one another and not having the excuse of, oh, I'm married now. And again, I'm talking about for your front row. You can't do it for everyone, but you know, there are people who matter enough to you where you should be able to, you know, show up for them.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So a lot of times I get from moms, and I think sometimes we as moms in general are trained to not talk about needing a break, right? Like that, in some way needing a break from your kids is a bad thing, right? It means something about you as a mom. It could mean you don't like your kids. It could mean, you regret having them. It could mean, like, people make it mean a lot of things. I remember seeing a video on YouTube, and this mom was, vlogging her experience in going to take a break from her kids, and she kept saying, well, this doesn't mean I don't like my kids, and I really enjoy being with my kids. And she just felt like she had to keep saying that over and over and over. And the reason why people say that over and over is because a lot of times it is almost taboo to be like, honey, I need to go. Like, so how do you feel about needing a break from your kids, right? Like, when do you know in your life when things are going on that it's time to take a break and you need to get away? And then what have been some of the benefits that you've seen from it that has led to you doing it more often than most?
So it's interesting because people who are parents will say that it's the hardest job they've ever had. And so it's odd to me that there also exists in the same space this idea of not needing a break from the hardest thing you've ever done. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
I will say, first off, for me, like I get really clear on whose voice I'm responding to. I know that I'm a damn good mom. I work really hard at it. I am oftentimes exhausted because of it. And those are the things that I know because I'm living it every day. And so whenever if a voice pops in my head, like, you shouldn't be doing that, or girl, you a mother, I check really quickly to say, okay, whose voice is that? Because it's not mine. Because I am a mother every day. I know that. I don't have
Yep.
to tell myself that,
Come
right?
on.
So that's kind of where it starts of checking that voice. I will admit that I am not the best at realizing that I need a break. I have just prioritized as a lifestyle travel, right? And so I say now, I was talking to a friend the other day and she was like, it's interesting. We're on the same team and, we have to check our schedules because we're both traveling. She's like, because I travel for work. And I was like, girl, I travel for sanity, right? So
Come on. Come on.
I don't even travel for work anymore, even though I did. But I just have these things that I want to do, whether it's a staple in my life. I'm going to Carnival every year. You can bet that in February for 2 weeks, I'm out. So that's always going to be standing on the calendar. I'm
Mm-hmm.
probably going to homecoming every year, right? So that's
Right.
two. And then if there's any celebrations, whether it's a marriage or a birthday, a milestone birthday, or a celebration, those are the things that I prioritize putting on my calendar. And what ends up happening, and I'll just share because when I was going to Carnival this year, Mama needed a break bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know that I was aware of how burnt out I was. I just knew I needed to get to the finish line, and the finish line was Carnival. And I was literally crawling in the desert, dehydrated, trying to get to this oasis that was Carnival. So I'll admit I'm not always good at knowing when I need a break. But I try to surround myself with people, generally moms, more experienced moms. One of my good friends, she has her daughter is a freshman in college, and her son is in grad school. So her kids are older than mine, and so she's able to provide perspective from someone who's made it through these elementary and middle school years, remembering how crazy and difficult they were, and providing advice from that perspective to be like, she's checking in saying, hey, we can't have you in the desert trying to get to the oasis again. What are you doing for yourself this week?
Right.
What are you doing for yourself that's local? Because I do travel for sanity. So I will book a flight. I will book a flight. I will hop on a
Mm-hmm.
plane.
Yeah.
Um, And so I'm trying to, as a lifestyle practice, get better at making space for myself so that I'm not, so that I don't end up in a place of like, oh, I need a trip. I'm happy that I already have the trips there, but this has to be a lifestyle of you making time for yourself consistently and not just now I'm burnt out, I should plan a trip because now you're too
Right.
exhausted to even go through the process. You
Yes.
need to be doing whatever your self-care is. I love soca music, so I need to take a soca fitness class every now and again because I can't get to
Hmm.
carnival every month like I would love to, but that gives me my little fix and it keeps me going so that again I'm not in this desert. So
Hmm.
give yourself a break if you're not the best at recognizing when you need the break, but try to also be proactive and just go ahead and put some stuff on the calendar, and then you have to be intentional about not about making it happen. So
Hmm.
that's kind of from the perspective of how do I know when I need a break. On the other side, the benefits.
How much time you got?
Listen, I mean, number one, I'm still alive. Like, I mean, there
Okay.
there are moments where, like, mentally, I'm having a breakdown. I'm
Right.
functioning because there's the physical activity of parenting, of getting kids from one place to the next, of waking them up in the morning, making sure they have clothes, going to run to take them to football practice and cheer, making sure that they get their homework done. That's the physical part of it that really takes up a lot of space. So you can mentally be drained and but physically going through the motions.
Hmm.
Post trip, I had the mental clarity to be more organized, to plan, to reach out to my network, to my support system to get support. It's really like a restart or a refresh, right? Like it's like, okay, well,
Hmm.
go back to home base, recharge, and then you can go and operate from a place of 100. Because without that, like, how else are you recharging?
Hmm.
So I definitely say the mental clarity is the biggest one so that I can continue to parent, continue to put, folks first. The relationships that I have with the people that I travel with, whether it's friends that I'm going with, or people that I'm meeting there, like we need that adult stimulation. We need that adult fun. I mean, kids are cool and all, but yeah, I don't want to know. I don't know how many more knock knock jokes I want to hear. Right? Like, maybe I want to talk about this meme that I saw that's not
Right.
appropriate for kids, right? And so you need that adult time, that intellectual stimulation, the thoughtful conversations, learning something new for yourself. And for me, I do get that whenever I'm on trips. And then also, like, I'm a little bit of a nerd, so I like learning. I like learning about people. And so whenever I'm going to these different places, I'm expanding my perspective on humanity, if you will. I'm learning about what the norms are there and how everything that I think is normal in my home, I realize can be changed if I so desire it to, because I'm seeing other norms in other places.
Hmm.
So I feel like the benefits are endless. But even if parenting is one of your top values, you need to have the energy to be able to do it well. And if nothing
Hmm.
else, that rest, that restart, that rejuvenation that a trip provides, it is 100% worth it.
Absolutely. Like the funny thing is, I what I didn't realize when I became a mother is how much more mothering is mental work than it is physical. Parenting is so much mental work because, especially like you were saying, if parenting is a value of yours and you're really trying to raise and rear adults who are independent, emotionally mature, right, responsible, accountable beings in civilization, right? Like, so, and you're also, and in doing that, you have to, in some ways, monitor yourself, right? Like, so you are raising them and you're rearing them, but in order to do that in a certain way, as a conscious parent, you are also monitoring yourself, the things you say, the things you do, the things you don't do it, how you approach. That is a lot of mental work every single day. Okay. And so for me, similar to you, like taking a getaway is a relief from what they call like the mommy mental load, right? Like there's always, in addition to the mental work of like raising them, there's always the running to-do list in your head of things you got to do today, next day, what got to do, and it never ends, right? And so I love the point that you made of like people say that parenting is one of the hardest things they've ever done, and at the same time, in some way, they may judge themselves with wanting to take a break from it. But if your job was the hardest thing you've ever done, you would be like, okay, I definitely need a break. And you end up taking a break every day. Like you get off of work, you may have vacation time, you take that break, and you may not feel any type of way about it. So I love, comparing those as an analogy, because it realistically, even though it's something that you value and it's something that, you signed up for, right? Like, you know, at the same time, you are still a human being, right? And it's important to rest and recharge. And so I get the same thing out of my breaks. Like I feel like I come back so much more refreshed.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's helpful because there's this thing that is after the trip that I call it like the hangover. So
Mm-hmm.
you come back from the trip and it's like all these things you got to do. You just like, but I just want to go back now. That's still gonna come, and that's fine. But I'm able to manage the hangover a bit better because I can reflect on all the fabulous memories I had on my trip. Okay.
Yep.
Um, so I'm trying to think. So I feel like there was something that you touched on that I wanted to go back to, and I cannot even remember. And I meant to write it down. I did not. So we're gonna keep going. Hopefully, come back to my head. Carnival this year. That's what it was.
Ah, woo, girl.
Carnival this year. So as a mom, a single mom, doing all the things by yourself, right? I want you to share a little bit about some of the challenges you encountered in getting to Carnival, and how you got through them. Because what I have noticed is a lot of times when challenges come to us, when we're planning the getaway and we're trying to take the getaway, we will make that a reason why we shouldn't be going,
Mm.
right? It's kind of like the obstacle shows up and it's like, see, that's why I shouldn't even be going. Or now I can't go. I'm just going to cancel the trip. Like it's just a wrap. The trip canceled, right? But me knowing what happened with you and getting to Carnival this year, like you really pushed through to the problem solving and not just the problem identification, and allowing that to be the obstacle that was going to stop your trip. Like you was like, no, this is indeed no, not an obstacle. So I want you to share about like what were some of the biggest obstacles you encountered, and like what were some of the thoughts that you had that allowed you to get through them and end up on the road. Okay.
Whoo, girl. It was one for the books. Okay. So, I had gone through the process and tried to do it as timely as possible to renew my passport. Got everything sent in. But in the space of momming, single momming, and doing all the things, when I sent in my passport application, I did not sign it. So they returned it back to me. And of course, when I got it, I'm like, oh my gosh. I immediately returned it overnight, thinking that that would ensure that my passport got to me on time. Long story short, it did not.
It did not.
And so now, mind you, I'm in the desert, thirsty. I can't walk. I'm
Right.
doing the whole military crawl because I don't have the energy. But at this point, I'm checking it week by week. I'm going online trying to see if there's been an update made to my status, and it doesn't happen. 2 weeks prior to my trip, I called the passport office, and I say, "Hey, I haven't gotten my passport yet. How can I?" And I pay the expedition fee, right? So, but I still haven't gotten it. What can I do? And they're like, oh, just wait. It's not even, you can't do anything. It's not even 2 weeks yet. So then we hit the 2 week mark and I'm like, okay, I still don't have it. And I call the passport office again and I try to get an appointment and they tell me that there are no appointments. So now I'm back in the waiting game. And luckily, I have learned to share with people whenever I'm going through something. And I share with one of my friends, like, okay, so it's Friday. My trip is on Tuesday. I still don't have a passport. I'm hoping that it shows up on Saturday, maybe on Monday. but what do I do? And so she then shared with me that she knew someone who had a similar passport issue, and they were able to get an appointment, but they had to fly to Miami to get the appointment. So then I get in contact with that person. They walk me through the process. But at this point, right, it's Friday evening. Passport office doesn't open again until Monday to try to get one of these appointments. So Monday morning, I began the process of calling, and every obstacle, like it just continued to be one after the other. The nearest place that I could get an appointment, this was 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, and they told me that they had an appointment in Louisiana for 9 a.m. Central Time. So in an hour, they could give me an appointment in Louisiana to go to the passport office. I said, ma'am, I live in North Carolina. Like, how is this going to work? Like, that doesn't work. She said, well, how about Denver, Colorado? I'm like, we're going west? That's not the direction I need to be going in. Do you have anything on the East Coast? I'm asking questions, and they're like, no, hang up, call back. So I had to do that a number of times before I was able to get an appointment in DC. So this is Monday morning. I was able to get a Tuesday morning appointment in Washington, D.C. Mind you, my flight is leaving Tuesday afternoon from Charlotte to get to Trinidad. So I immediately am like, okay, what should I do? I got to book a flight to DC. I also need to get lodging in DC. And I also need to change my flight from North Carolina to Trinidad to somehow see if I can leave from DC. So I'm working through all the different scenarios. Should I leave? Should I keep my original flight, fly to DC, and then fly back? Will I make that flight? Can they change it so that my itinerary goes straight from DC? All of these things. I'm on the phone making phone calls. Mind you, as I'm kind of last minute doing my packing. Also preparing to leave my kids for 2 weeks, right? So this is supposed to be the day to finalize. This is, around Valentine's Day. I still needed to pick up Valentine's Day cards for my kids for their classroom. Like there were just so many little, odds and ends. I had my haircut and nail appointment, but I'm still trying to manage this because I got to get to Trinidad. And so I was able to get everything. I made it to DC. And when I got to DC, when I got off the flight, they broke my bag. So mind you, I'm packed from North Carolina to go to DC, but to leave DC and go straight to Trinidad because my flight is the next day. So I have a big bag. I'm there for 2 weeks, right? With all of the costume things. There's a theme for every party, right? Like this isn't just go pick up a dress for one party. We're doing 3 parties a day, for 10 days. So there's a lot of stuff in this bag. And I mean, they break the whole wheel off the bag. So I got a tricycle for a roller bag. I'm just like, are you serious?
Really? Come on.
So, and this is at midnight. I get there at midnight, right? So we don't even have a lot of time. So I wake up the next morning. I go to the passport office. My appointment was at 10, but I was like, if y'all open at 8, I'm going to be there at 7:30 or 7:45. I was there at 7:45. They found out they opened at 7:30. I wish I would have been there 15 minutes earlier, but I went through, gave them my information, and of course they told me that it takes at least 4 hours before they'll even look at your information because those people don't even come to work until 11. And I have a 1 o'clock flight from Charlotte. Okay. Don't worry about it. I'm going to let y'all handle y'all business because now I need a bag. So I leave. This is feel like a long story, but I'm telling y'all, challenge after challenge after challenge.
Challenge after challenge.
I leave the passport office. I left my bag at the hotel bellman with the hotel bellman. I leave the passport office. Oh, because I couldn't bring my suitcase because it was too big to go through the metal detectors. So I leave. Once I give them my information, I go to TJ Maxx. I get a bag. I take the bag back to the airport. In the lobby, repack my bag from the old tricycle bag to the new bag, and then take an Uber. In the lobby. Listen, y'all look at these candies today because I got to get this bag back because I got things to do. So there comes a certain point where you can't worry about who's watching. You really got to, just kind of zero in on how you're going to make this happen. So I made it back to the passport office. My passport was available. But I don't know if you guys remember, I wasn't able, if I shared this, I wasn't able to change my flight information because all flights to Trinidad are booked, and they're overbooked. So if they take me off my flight, that seat is not going to be available to rebook, and they couldn't partially book all this. So whatever. I get my passport. I hightail it to the airport because the lady I was on the phone with did tell me that like sometimes they save a couple of flights seats available for people to purchase at the counter. So I get to the counter and I'm like, hey, I got a flight that's leaving from Charlotte. There's not enough time for me to book a separate flight, to me to have enough time to book, to pack, to check my bags, all of these things. I end up with the right lady, and she's calling and she's making notes, and she tried on her own, and she's like, let me call some people. So she's on the phone and she's writing down, because the change fee was going to be like $500. And I'm like, fine, like whatever you got to do, get me on this flight. And then I see her mark out the 488, $500, and write like $100, 98 bucks or something like that. And I don't know what she's saying, but I'm paying it. Whatever it is, I'm paying it. And she gets off the phone and she's like, okay, here's your ticket. You're going to fly from DC to Miami and then catch your original flight from Miami to Trinidad. And you also received $100 credit because this flight ends up being cheaper.
A credit? Come on, Lord.
Won't he do it?
Yeah, won't he?
Won't he do it? And so I spent, the next, hour at the airport calling all the people who had given me some tips, advice, and celebrating with them the fact that I made it. So I went from thirsty crawling in the desert to having to sprint to the finish line to make sure that I made it to Trinidad.
Child, this is like a case study in making it work and won't he do it? Like, it's just like, it to me, I love this story every time I hear it, because I'm just like, if you let the obstacles stop you, they will stop you. Period. Like, if you decide they're not going to stop you, they won't stop you. Yep. Period. Like, sometimes you just can't be worried about what people going to say. Like, sometimes you just are going to have to fit in the solving of the problem into all of your life, right? You still got stuff to do for your kids. You still got to do the Valentine's Day stuff. You still got to plan for your trip. You still got to pack for your trip. And a problem has arisen, and we just going to add that problem to the list because we're getting to the finish line. Like, we're not going to just decide that negates everything else. Like, and then also sometimes you just got to pay the money. You just got to be ready to pay the additional money, right? Like, if you're going to have to drop a couple more dollars in order to get to the finish line, okay. It's going to be worth it on the other side. It's okay. Like, and you will always have money coming in at some point in your life, so just go ahead and drop those coins. Like, just be ready to go ahead and drop those coins to make it work. Like, it's just, to me, like, and it's funny because when I think about us going to Bali next week, caveat, we going to Bali next week, y'all, for Z's birthday. I feel like I have been in that story to get to Bali. Right? Like, just problem after problem after problem, life problems show up, trip problems show up, people who you think that you're going to be able to leverage in order to make stuff more simple, not making it more simple, like just all the things. And at any point, I could have just been like, girl, I ain't going to be able to make it to Bali, child. It just ain't going to work out. It ain't going to work, see? It ain't going to work. However, like, I very much made a decision similar to you. Like, the obstacles are not going to stop me. Like, if I got to crawl to the finish line, if I got to spend more coin than I expected to spend, it's gonna be okay because I'm gonna be on this trip.
Absolutely. I love the part that you pointed out of, you still have to handle life, right? Like, I couldn't just pick up and go to DC. I then had to call my parents and be like, hey, you remember you were supposed to come and stay with the kids tomorrow? Can you come today? Kids, I know this was supposed to be our last night together, but I'm leaving tonight. But I did get you your Valentine's Day cards that, yes. And all of your bags are packed. All of your clothes is already laid out. I have to walk them through, trying to help them be responsible. These are your clothes for school. These are your clothes for practice. Your grandparents shouldn't have to, go find things for you. You need to know where they are. So in the midst of trying to get to my trip, I still had to take care of life. Yeah, I couldn't just abandon those things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I know, and I think we talked a little bit about this with regard to like making it a lifestyle, right? Like, so right now you are, doing the most, like even this year, you've gone to Trinidad Carnival this year. We went to Belize for my birthday, right? We about to go to Bali for your birthday. After that, you going to homecoming, after that, like, and with a full plate of responsibilities. Because if y'all heard the intro, she doing the most, right? Like, so most Black moms tell me they don't have the time, right? Like, they're just like, I don't have time to take a getaway. I don't have time to plan this. I don't have, I have a full plate, right? Like, these are the things they tell me. Like, how do you find the time? What are you doing? Like, so, and they use that to talk themselves out of it, or, just the reason why it's not possible. And they really do feel like it's not possible. Mm-hmm. So what I'm wondering is, and also, like, you have 2 children, but you also have brought another child into your home, right? So, which is a whole nother dynamic that you've added on top of this, right? And so how are you finding the time, right, to do these things and incorporate these things into your life?
Well, it's important to me to be the decider of my time. And what I know for a fact is any of those women who said that they don't have the time, if their job said, you know what, in 2 weeks, we need you to go to Minnesota, you're going to be there for a month, and this is when you'll be able to come home, they would grump. They would be grumpy. They would complain. They would, be upset about it, but they would do it, right? Mm-hmm. They would create a plan to make it happen. I don't want the only time that I make space for myself or allow for change to be when somebody else tells me to. Mm-hmm. And so often, our jobs are the thing that is the major determining factor in terms of the parameters or boundaries that we create for life, or the structure that we create for life. And I would say for myself, and I would encourage other women, for you to take the reins back, for you to take control over that, for you to be the one to say, hey, this is a shift that's going to happen in my life, and this is how I'm going to accommodate for it. Because I promise you, if your boss told you had to go somewhere, you would do it. You wouldn't quit. You wouldn't blow up the whole thing. You're not going to do that. So for me, it's been, and maybe it's because I also traveled for work for a while, right? So I think that also has something to do with the comfort. When I first had my son, I was a sales trainer. So I was traveling all over. And I just made that a part of my parenting, right? I'd talk to him about the airport, and I'd always bring him something back from every city that I went to. I'd show him, the planes while I'm sitting in the airport, waiting to board. So I know that our jobs require us to do things, and maybe your job doesn't require it today, but things change. And if they did require it tomorrow, you would make it happen. So I have taken kind of the onus and said, I'm going to be responsible for any change that's happening in my life. And I'm going to do it for the good, for something that I actually want. Because, like I said, you may be going to Minnesota, no disrespect to Minnesota, but do you want to be there? So instead of going to Minnesota where you don't want to be, why not book a trip to somewhere you actually want to go?
Right. Yeah. And to me, like, confidence, I think a lot of moms think that confidence is something that you have. And what I've learned is confidence comes from doing something so much that you have plenty of evidence that you could do it.
Yes.
Right? So that even when you do encounter the obstacles, or the time obstacle, right? The time obstacle, right? When you encounter that, you have evidence to say, well, this is a time when I didn't have time and I made it work, right? Mm-hmm. Or this is a time where I fit it in my schedule and I changed these things around so I could do it again. But until you decide to step into the realm and start taking action and stumble through it and work through it, you will never have the confidence to be like, even though I don't have time, I'm going to make time, and this is how I'm going to do it, and it's just going to work out. Right?
And time is no different than any other, I'll call it a commodity in our lives, right? So if your mother was your babysitter, and she decided she got a new job, or, maybe unfortunately her health isn't the best and she can't take care of the kid anymore, you now have to create a new plan. You'll take a look, you'll take a look at the structure to say, okay, these are the hours in which, she kept the kid. And then you'll take a look at your budget and you'll say, this is how much I had to spend, or this is what I was spending, whether you were taking food over there. You'll assess what you currently have, what you're currently doing, and then you'll adjust. Same thing with your budget. If you're a homeowner, expenses come out of the blue. Oh my gosh, we need a new air conditioner unit for the house. well, I'm going to have to take a look at my budget. I'm going to have to take a look at, what type of unit we had, what would it cost to get a new one, look at my budget to see where I can save some funds, and then you make a decision, and then you go about changing. If your job tells you you work remote, now you have to come into the office. All right, well, let me take an assessment, see, what's going to have to change. Time is just like any one of those other commodities where all you have to do is take an assessment to see what happens in a week if you want to go on a 1 week vacation. So, there's, activities on these days, there's meals, there's clothes, there's, even your own personal activities. Some of those things you're gonna be like, okay, well, I just can't do it this week, right? Like, I can't go to missionary meeting at the church on this Wednesday because I'm gonna be gone. I can find someone to take the kids these days, my partner, or in this case, if you don't have a partner, who in my village can I lean on? Is this a sleepover weekend? If it's a weekend trip, can my kids spend the night at their best friend house for 2 nights instead of one because I'm going to be out of town? But all of these things, you already have a structure around it. You just need to be intentional about seeing what that is and then figure out how to pivot, for that limited amount of time. So you're doing it already in your life. You're already, making accommodations, shifting. So do it for yourself. Time is not this, singular space where you don't have enough of it. You don't have enough of a lot of things, but you still make it work.
Right. Yeah. Like, so what would you say is the biggest, like where you are now, like what was the biggest obstacle that you feel like you encountered to taking kid-free vacations?
It's the kids. My kids love being at home with their parents, whether they're here with me or they're with their dad. And so there are times where I'm able to build trips around times when they go to see their father. So I don't have that emotional pull and oh, mom, you're leaving. Like, oh my gosh, like, I don't want to go wherever. So sometimes that works. And other times it's having a conversation to say, you get to hang out with your friends all the time. Mommy wants to see her friends.
Mm-hmm.
And trusting that I have parenting as a value, and so I'm being a damn good parent outside of this 1 week that I may be gone.
Right.
And they're going to remember the 80% of the time that I'm there, and not the 20% of the time that I'm gone. Not even that I'm gone 20%, right?
Right.
But if it was a 80-20, right? Like 80% of the time you're with your parent, so you'll be fine. And they also need to learn that independence. And guess what? They survive every time. They
Come on.
survive every time. They go to their activities, and they see their friends. And so that the mom guilt for me, it doesn't come from the outside. It isn't someone else's voice, like someone who I think may be judging me. It's from my own kids, and them not wanting any change in their kind of schedule, or whatever their just daily habits are. But I know that they need to have a muscle built up of like things aren't going to be consistent for the rest of your life, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
going to need these moments to pivot. And then I tell them, like, then you should really appreciate your mother when she is here. So
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. And how old are your kids?
I have a 7-year old, 11-year old, and a 12-year old.
Okay. Yeah. So, they're in the mid range. They're not like my kids are really young. They're in the mid range, and even though they're independent, they still very much need mom around a lot more. So I want to talk about dad, right? And how you have incorporated him into being able to support you or your schedule with regard to taking these trips. Like, how often are they with him? And was that a purposeful choice for you? Like, at the time of year, was it, on purpose? And how have you garnered his support, right, in you taking these types of getaways?
So having him be a regular part of their life was a priority for me. So they see him pretty often, at least every other month, and then with longer stints during holidays, whether it's Christmas, Thanksgiving, summers, spring break, things like that. So it ends up being that they see him every other month. And then, there's a longer stretch during the summer, which unfortunately is becoming shorter because of kids' activities that got to come back. And for me, that's not something that I communicate to him. We have very separate lives. The the common thread in our lives are the kids. And so if it relates to the kids, then we have that discussion, but we don't have any discussions otherwise. I'm not saying like, hey, I want to go out of town. Can you take the kids this week? That's just not the relationship that we have. And he's not, saying the same, asking the same of me either. We are both sticking to the responsibilities of whenever we're supposed to have our children, then that's when we're supposed to have our children. And so the beauty in that is, I know when they're going to be with him, so I can use that time to schedule a trip. But outside of that, if it's my turn to have the kids, then I have to lean into other resources. But because it is, so the priority of them spending time with him came first, and then secondary is like, okay, well, I know I have this break. I can use this as a time to travel.
Mm-hmm. I like that setup. I think that, and I don't know anything about co-parenting, child. I don't know anything about the struggles and the ups and downs, but I think that if two parents can decide that I am committed to being present and I'm committed to the schedule we've agreed to.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Then it makes it much more palatable of an experience, right? For the kids and for the parents. What I'm wondering is, how do you navigate? Because I know there are also moms who don't have the dad who will always be consistent with the schedule, right? And like your kid's father doesn't live in the same state as you. But there are moms who have the dad who lives in the same state, right? And the schedule isn't as structured, right? And sometimes it's their week and there's some sort of thing that comes up, right? Is this something, and then the mom just ends up taking over, right? So is this something that you have encountered, and how have you handled that?
I think this is true, more true outside of marriage, but I think it has some truth in it in marriage and just in life in general, is that I can only control myself. I can only control what I can control. And you have to be really honest about what the situation looks like and then create a structure around that. So if you know that you have an inconsistent partner, if that inconsistency leads to the time whenever your children are supposed to be with him, then you need to already have a backup plan for what happens if he falls through. You don't wait until he falls through because you already know that the chances are it's going to fall through, especially if you're using that time as time for yourself. Because what you don't want to get in the habit of doing is coming to the rescue and then taken away from your time, because then you're just going to be more depleted. So of course, if you live closer and there's more frequency in terms of when your children are supposed to be with them, every time that your children are supposed to be with their father, it's not going to be a trip that you're planning. But if you know that in 2 months that weekend, you're going to have a trip, and you know that it's more than likely that he may back out, then you have your backup plan. And honestly, I would even go as far as to already ask someone like, hey, could you keep the kids this weekend? And if their father is able to keep them, then you say, I don't need you this weekend. Like, and hopefully this is somebody you have an honest relationship with, to say, I want the kids to stay with you this weekend. Their father may come to pick them up, and so you may be off the hook. But I want to know, can you actually commit to keeping them this weekend? Rely on the people who are reliable. Don't get mad because the unreliable people are unreliable. They've already showed you that, right? So if you're setting up a trip during a time where you know that they're supposed to be with their father, and the chances are he may or may not show up, already have your plan in place. And even just for your time off, right? Like, if it's every other weekend, then one of those weekends a month, you might need to rely on your village, whoever that is. It may be sending them to, spend a night at a friend's house for the weekend, or your family, or somebody that's part of a mom's group. But you really need to build that in, so that, again, you can't only be doing these things for a trip. You have to have this as a regular part of your lifestyle. So how do you take breaks? Who do you lean on? And honestly, not being afraid, or even if you are afraid, doing it anyway, of asking for more. Like, she only keeps them one night, and so I don't want to ask for two. But if she's kept them from one night, you can ask, hey, I really need a break. I'm going to, go out of town just to get a getaway. Could you keep them for 2 nights this weekend? Right. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure the people who love and care for you and want to see you thriving and doing well, they're more than likely to say yes. Because also you're not going to abuse it. You already don't do nothing for yourself. We're trying to get you to the space of doing something for yourself. It's not like you're that person that like, every time you ask for one night, they end up staying two. That's not
Yes.
who you are. So
Right.
just be careful in your mind that you're not worried about situations that you'll never be in.
Right.
I don't want them to think that I'm just throwing my kids off on. Have you ever done that?
Right. Is that even you? That's not
Is
you.
that even you? Have they ever said that? Like, has it ever happened? No. Okay. We don't deal with negative hypotheticals. So
Thank
put
you.
those negative hypotheticals away and deal with the reality and lean into those people who love you and who are already supporting you.
I love this so much. Let me tell you. These are some keys, y'all. If y'all have a notebook, write it down, okay? And this is for the moms who are co-parenting because I know it can be a struggle. But the key here was control what you can control, right? And you can control if they fall through having a backup, right? You have control of that, right? You have control of who the backups are, right? You have control of, you asking for help, even if it may feel a little uncomfortable. And you also have control of what you tell yourself it means about you as a mom and when you ask for help. Okay? You have control of these things. So control the controllables. I love that. Like I have this thing that I, work with moms on activating their village, right? And a lot of times people will say, I don't have nobody to watch my kids, right? And what it really means is I'm not comfortable asking for help, right? Because that's what that translates to. I'm not comfortable asking for help because I have decided that asking for help means X about me as a mom, right?
Mhm.
Right?
Yep.
And no, like you activate your village by being vulnerable with them about what you need, telling them what you need, right? You activate your village by showing up for them as well, right? Like so that trust, that mutual trust and friendship is built. And you also activate your village by making sure that they know what you want and that you have put dates on the calendar. There's clear understanding. You have a backup, like, and being okay with it, like telling yourself that it's okay. Like for our trip to Bali, the way our schedule is set up, I have our girls in the morning. I mean, Tawana has our girls in the morning. I have them in the evening because he works in the evenings. So I was like, who do I want to be here while I'm in Bali to take over my shift, right? I live with their grandparents. My husband is here. I have friends in Philly. But one of the things that I had when I grew up was I used to literally be in New Jersey for months in the summer. Right? I ain't heard from my mom. I just realized this as an adult. I was like, Monica, you was out here enjoying your life, wasn't you?
She was
Like,
in Monica, not your
you
mother. Yeah.
was. Okay.
Mhm.
And I was like, I had aunts, I had uncles, I had great aunts, I had great uncles, I had great grandmothers. Like, just I was with everybody in my family, and it gave me the ability to, at this point in my life, be in a lot of rooms and be completely comfortable with interacting with a whole bunch of different people, right? Um, and so I'm flying my youngest brother in, right? Because they don't get a chance to spend a lot of time with him. He's young, right? He don't have much to do. And they get to see a different side, right, of their family, right? They get to be with another person. So another thing is the way that you activate your village is by being okay with them creating an environment that you would create, but not necessarily parenting the way you would parent, right? Like, because these kids need the different types of experiences, right? They need, different types of engagement. And so not being so strict about it has to be this, right? These are the things that have to happen while I'm away in this order at this time, right? Like, no, you can't activate your village that way. You got to be flexible, right? Are they fed? Are they clean? Are they safe? Right? Do we have the same morals and principles? So I know we're going to be good, right? And the rest of it, I see y'all when I get back because I know you're gonna be okay, and I trust that my kids are gonna be okay.
And it's like that's why I have you in my life, right? Because I trust you. I like you. I like what you stand for. We agree on so many things. Are we the same person? Absolutely not. But there is this bit of releasing the need to control everything, and you got to do some work on why you feel the need to control everything, and also accept that even if you control everything, you still can't control the person, right? So you're trying to create these environments in order to predict the outcome of who your children are going to be. And the biggest variable in that is them being themselves, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's important. I've always had as a value, it's important for my kids to learn from multiple people. Like I can't be the single source of truth because I think that prevents them from being critical thinkers, from being able to um, digest information and pull apart what's real and what's not. If they've only heard one thing one way, then that's really going to be limiting to them. They're only going to see things one way, and there isn't a one size solution for everything, and so it could be
Mm-hmm.
harmful for them to think that life is only one way. So the beauty in allowing them to learn from other people, like my mother, they got the karaoke machine at the house. The kids are on the microphone, giving testimonials, right? Or they leading the worship song. It's just not happening at my house, mostly because I'm doing homework, I'm doing laundry. I don't have a karaoke machine. I got speakers, but I don't have a mic. But that's just something that like I didn't even have as something that I needed them to learn how to do, but that's something that they're comfortable doing. Like they know how to stand and hold a mic and talk on the microphone. But they got that at their grandmother's house. Even if they didn't feel like being there because they'd rather be at their house with their gaming devices and their friends and whatever, there's still value in learning from other people, because I trust that the people around me have something to impart, on my children. So if you have people that you trust, which I hope you do, if you don't, you need to go find some.
Mm-hmm.
But allow them to pour into your children too, because that's just going to increase their exposure and awareness to things outside of just what it is that you're sharing with them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I'm gonna do a rapid round of strategy questions.
Ooh.
So I want to know what are some of the key things you do to to plan, right? And this is how do you make planning more easy with a full plate of responsibilities?
Okay. Oh, that's the question.
That's question number one.
How do I make planning easy? I have one place, right? I put everything in my calendar on my phone. That's number one. So I'm always checking the calendar to see what's on the docket. I mean, I have to plan everything from after school activities to hair appointments to spirit weeks. It all has to live in one place so that I'm aware of all the things that are happening. So like that is a big one. Um, as it relates to I guess the kids and kind of managing them, um, I have people helping me on the regular day to day, so it doesn't become so much of a burden when I'm going to step away. So I know I need a break. Wednesdays are my days that somebody else takes the kids to their activities. So I already have that in. So that also gives the other person a peek into like what the structure looks like, so they're not coming in blindly whenever I step away.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I think about planning the trip, to be quite honest, I let somebody else plan it. I can't I can't be in control of everything. That somebody else is Inez. Or whoever. Listen, if you want me to plan a trip, that's why we booked Bali 5 weeks before, because like that just ain't my forte. But if you tell me this is where we go and pay your money, I'm gonna pay my money and I'm gonna show up and I'm gonna make sure we have a good time. But I lean into whether it's package trips, like lean into your Groupons, your Travelocities, I don't know, wherever you're getting these prepackaged trips, lean into that or lean into your friends who enjoy planning because you really can't do it all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I will also say that I do have a travel kit that has like my toiletries so that I'm not having to waste time remembering to pack,
Mm-hmm.
toothbrush, toothpaste, or using my house stuff for that. I already have certain my little travel thing. Like I just pull those things out. So I think
Mm-hmm.
those are kind of. I'm sure there's 1,000 more, but
Yes, those are
mhm.
those are good. Those are good. Like know your role, and then also have stuff. planned. Like,
Yes.
so the other question is, how do you budget for travel? Like, how do you find the money to travel?
Well, I think first you got a budget in general. You have to know what your funds look like. I do have certain set trips, right? Like homecoming and carnival are always on the to-do list. And those, because I'm going to a particular event, they have a schedule. I know when flights are coming out. And like for carnival, it's a year-long planning process, right? So
Mhm.
we were at carnival February, I think in by the beginning of April, I had already booked my flight for the following year. So I already booked my flight, paying for the lodging. That is like a bi-monthly expense. We break it down. I know that costumes are released in July, and so between July and September is when I have to make my deposit. I know in October is when they start releasing the parties, right? So it's sectioned out over a year so that I'm not spending one lump sum. And I try to do that for any trips that I know that are planned, right? I book my Airbnb for homecoming as soon as they announce the dates, months before. Um, Book my flight for that. So yeah, I think those are kind of the main strategies I use.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And side note, if y'all want to be able to unlock your travel funds, make sure you click the description. Look in the description for a link. It's a checklist that I created for you to be able to use your bills and your expenses to effortlessly fund your getaway. So, make sure you click on that. The next question is, how do you ease the anxiety or the stress or the sadness that your kids may have while you're gone?
So it's been different over the years, right? Now I'm at a space of being upfront with them, telling them what it is, and I'll say like, I know you may be upset about this, about what I'm going to tell you. However, I need for you to not complain when I tell you, number one. And number two, I need for you to tell me one good thing that could come out of this scenario. And so, because they are prepared for the bad thing, like most humans, when somebody's preparing you for bad news, your brain goes all the way to the worst possible news. And you're just like, I don't know how I'm gonna be able to deal with if they tell me this. Like you've already decided what they're gonna tell you.
Right.
And then I tell the kids, I'm going out of town. You're gonna be staying with your grandmother or, whatever the plan is. Um, Tell me one good thing about that. So when I say it, they're like, oh yeah. They're kind of like, you always go out of town.
Right.
um, so I
Like,
let
that's it,
I
girl.
let them think the worst, and then I force them to come up with one good scenario about it. And it could be like, if you were with me, you would miss a birthday party. So the good thing could be like, I get to go to Luke's birthday party. That was one scenario. Um,
Mm,
but yeah, so that's always a feat. Because emotions are real. And kids are the most raw with theirs. Adults, we figured out how to mask and compartmentalize and not tell the truth about how we're feeling. But when kids are upset, they will tell you.
tell that
So
business.
I have anxiety about telling them because I know they're going to have anxiety. But I try to be upfront and prepare them, and let them speak about it.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Okay, and so the last question is, do you travel solo? And when you travel solo, if you do travel solo, like how do you what are some of the things that you do to make sure that you feel or are safe when you're by yourself?
Okay. So I don't travel solo a lot. However, I have a lot of experience because I travel for work and I was, going up and down the East Coast working with these different call centers. And so I was there alone. So in a situation like that, because I was going to the same place, I would pick a hotel. And when I would go to that city, I would always stay at that same hotel. Right. So I have some type of a pattern, and some form of like familiarity with where I am. So that's more on like if you're doing something that's on a consistent basis. I definitely only eat at like popular restaurants. I wouldn't go to like a hole in the wall or just go and venture off, especially if I'm in another country. um, I'm going to go to the place where the hotel recommends. um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I did have a solo travel, solo trip that I also kind of booked last minute, just realizing like I need this. And so one of the things at that point, I did lean into a travel agent to help book because they know which hotels are reputable. They set up like my transfers, and I didn't have to question whether or not there was any safety. Like they had more experience. So when you don't have experience yourself, you need to find someone whose experience you can lean on. And so for me, that was a travel agent. And like I said, I would just go to popular places. That's not the time you want to, go off the beaten path. At least not for me. That's some people's lifestyle, but it's not mine. Um, so I want to go to
That
the
would be
most.
me, y'all.
I
I
want to
would
go.
be out here in the hole in the wall, like, ah!
And it's funny. I was actually thinking about Sheree. Was I
Oh,
know
yes.
Dora the Explorer will be
Yes.
solo at the hole in the wall. That's
Yes.
I mean, I ain't doing it. But if I meet a friend and I meet someone that I can trust, right? Then I'm willing to venture out more. So just because I travel somewhere solo, meaning I don't, it isn't planned for someone to go with me. I am open to meeting people whenever I'm out, and I'm a pretty good judge of character. I've lived at different places, worked at different places, so um, I trust myself in identifying people who are safe, and then I'm a little bit more comfortable venturing out than I would if it's just me on a strict solo trip, not talking to anyone
Right.
and only moving by myself.
Right. Yeah. Like, and if y'all missed, I did an interview with Sheree. If you missed it, make sure you go check it out. And she talks a lot about how to activate your village and just how she do be out these streets, honey. She is indeed the Dora Explorer of this conglomerate. So yeah, so this has been so good. Like I
Yeah.
have really enjoyed this interview, like just learning more about like how you're doing it. And it's been good to hear about how you are still getting to the joy, right? Still getting to the joy in the midst of lifing.
Mhm.
If y'all have enjoyed this video and there's something that has stood out to you or has been really helpful, make sure you like the video and leave your biggest takeaway in the comments. Like, I'm sure there are moms who are just like Z, right? And I call her Z, y'all, because we've been friends forever, okay?
But the rule is, my name is what?
Zenitra. That's the rule. Okay, so when you reach out to her, which I'm gonna put all of the links to her stuff, including her YouTube channel, Life Unlearned, in the description as well. I'm sure there are moms just like you out there who are just like, this co-parenting thing got me stuck at the house. Like, I just don't know if I can, rely on dad. Like, and sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. And just my time is, taken up because now I'm a single parent now, whether you were married before or whether you've never been married, right? So I hope that this video has been a real resource for you to know that you can indeed make this happen. So is there anything that we did not talk about that you want to make sure that you share with single moms or divorced moms or co-parenting moms that you feel like they need to know?
I think that a lot of this really boils down to get into the root of what you value. And there's so many ways to execute that value. For me, freedom is a big value of mine. First is honesty, authenticity, and then freedom. And so I live that out in every area of my life, right? So I live that out in how I parent. I live that out in how I show up at work. And so once you get clear on what you value, it'll free you from the expectations and opinions that other people have so that you can make space for something that can be, as rejuvenating as travel in your life. If you're feeling uneasiness, if you're feeling angst, I would recommend trying to get back to the core of you and then move from that place. Because once you know that you know that you know you, it makes you rely a lot less on other people. So, I mean, you can come here and get advice and understand how other people are doing it, but you got to get clear on you and then move from that place.
That is the truth, y'all. That is the truth. It's so important to get clear on you. And the closer you are to understanding that, I found the closer I have gotten to understanding who I am has allowed me to really lean into it, even when leaning into it means not fitting the stereotypical mom role, right? Or the things that mom does or supposed to do, or I'm just like, however, I'm me. Like, but I'm me.
I'm
And
me.
I'm gonna do this.
Yes.
Here, this is what I'm gonna do. So yeah, so if you are a mom, which I'm sure you are, if you've gotten this far, and you want to be able to confidently take the next getaway, take the trip, get some, free time in your life within the next 3 months, make sure you click the link in my description as well to book a call with me to work more closely with me. This is what I help moms do. This is what I help myself do. And I would love to support you in doing this. So thank you for joining us.
This was
And we'll see you on the next Kid Free Vacation interview. Bye, y'all.
Bye.